So welcome everybody to our Data Science at Stanford seminar series. This is the first one of the academic year. My name is Hector Garcia Molina. I'm a professor in the Computer Science and Electrical Engineering Department. So just a few words about this seminar series. We've had over the past few years several data science initiatives on campus, one in the medical school, one in the engineering school, sort of centered, although they're all broad and include other people, and one in sort of the humanities and sciences. But we've started bringing them together, coordinating them, and one of the first things we did is get this joint seminar series. We had one opening seminar last academic year with John Hennessy, our president, and some of us there. We had a nice panel discussion. This is the second one, and we have a nice set of excellent speakers lined up. If you're interested, and I'll repeat this at the end, we have a nice website called datascience.stanford.edu. Data science, no space, and you can find all sorts of information about the initiatives and the speakers that we have lined up at the seminar and so on. Okay, so today we have a fantastic speaker. Udi Manber is an old friend. He's worked in the data science world. It wasn't called data science when we started, but he's worked with data all his life. He's had an illustrious career. He was a professor at Arizona, did some groundbreaking work in string matching and a whole bunch of other things. Then went to work at Yahoo, then Amazon, A9, then Google, and is now at NIH. That we'll hear more about that. But he's had important posts at Google. Or in Yahoo, you were sort of head of search, right? Basically, so it's a very important position in those companies. So the way we formatted this is not just a plain talk, but we're going to give Udi a chance to talk for like up to 10 minutes, tell us his thoughts, and then like PhD defense style. After his presentation, I'm going to quiz him and make sure that he really understands what he's talking about. And then we'll open it up in the last 20 minutes or so for questions from the audience, okay? We thought this would be a more dynamic type of thing. Okay, so Udi.
I was fortunate enough, or maybe visionary, at the beginning of the web, back in '93 when Mosaic came up, to realize that that's going to change everything. And I was working on search at the time, and we moved directly all the way to the browser. And I remember this was 22 years ago. And I remember going around universities like that and giving talks at the time, 93, 94, and saying, you know, this is going to change everything. And people said, nah, not really. You know, the networking part, the network protocol is very simple. There's nothing new in that. It's not done particularly well. And the data model, they don't even have a data model. It's all a mess. They didn't even work with it. We know how to do databases. We know how to do it right. This is nothing new. And the language that they use, that's a joke. So there's nothing new there. Why should we care? And I remember that very well, because I said, no, you don't understand. This is going to be in every house. That's why it's going to change everything. It's not the technology underlying it. It's the fact that everybody's going to use it. So everybody will have access to information. It's not just a few people with workstations. It's going to be everybody. And that is fundamental change. And over the years, I was involved in a lot of companies and talked to a lot of companies. And I've seen business areas after business areas moving into the web, many of them kicking and streaming, saying, well, it doesn't apply to us. It applies to somebody else. And eventually, it did apply to them. Because this fundamental thing of getting everybody access to all the information and being able to contribute to that information is really a huge change. And I gave that talk 20 years ago. It was very hard. 10 years ago, it was a little bit easier, although, again, lots of businesses didn't really buy into that. And I think today is pretty well understood. Healthcare, I think it did significantly change healthcare, but not as much as I would have hoped. I can tell you one example, whereas when I ran Google search, I looked all the time at medical queries, all queries, but particularly medical queries. And at some point, I realized that if you look for specific medical question, if you look for the head, like if you search for diabetes or cancer, you're going to get great information. There are lots of sources that will give you a great introduction. But if you look for a specific problem, you know, I have this condition and that condition, and now it hurts here, what do I do? Or any kind of specific question. We at the time were sending more people to Yahoo Answers than NIH and WebMD combined for a specific question. And I said, well, that can't be. And so I twice formed groups within search ranking to improve ranking just for health queries. And we twice failed. And by failed, I mean we couldn't improve the algorithm to do better than the regular algorithm. And the reason for that was that the data was not available. But it was just not, we couldn't find things that were not there. It wasn't that we didn't search well, we couldn't find them. So it kind of raised the issue quite a bit. We did several really good things as well. It wasn't a complete failure. But I kept trying to say, what else can we do to get better information? Because if you think about it, healthcare is really, in great part, just a pure information business. True, there are surgeons who cut and do things, and they have to have really, really great skills and so on. But for a great part, it's somebody who comes with a piece of information, and you have, as a doctor, you have a lot of knowledge, and then you match the knowledge to that piece of information, and then you give them some more information. It's about information. So if there's one thing I want to leave you with, is this particular quote from a movie that came up actually a year before the web. So it actually predicted the web, at least that particular piece.
It's all about the information.
That's really true. Okay, that's what we proved.
What movie is that?
The movie is called Sneakers, Robert Redford. It came up in '92.
It's set in Palo Alto.
It's set in Palo Alto, correct? So it was indeed all about the information. Okay, let's move on. Can you move to the next slide? Oh. So if you think about the information that have to do with medical field, I kind of identify 4 areas of large information. So they're very different. There are scientific articles, mostly used by researchers. There is the popular press, mostly used by patients. There is electronic medical records. They are now starting to become more available, and more people are doing research on it, particularly at Stanford and other places, and that could be a huge source of information. And there is the claims, insurance claim data. And again, there are lots of companies who now have access to some of it and try to get information. All of them are large. None of them sort of talk too much to one another, and there are really no groups that look at all of them together trying to figure out, well, what can we find about information from all of it? It's done mostly piece by piece, each one for a different reason, for a different thing. And if you think about the web, right, we can learn not just what exists, but we can learn, businesses learn how to do their business in real time. You try something, you look at it, okay, a second later, there are 100 people doing it in this particular way, you see how it is, you change things, you keep trying things, and you keep getting information back. Most businesses do that. The big companies do it every day. At Google, we had something called 1% experiment, which was actually 0.1% experiment, which meant we could run 1,000 of them at any given time without conflicting with one another, and even that was not enough. We needed more than 1,000. So people run experiment like crazy. On the other hand, so having direct access to all your customers, to millions or billions of customers, is a huge thing. But somehow it's not used as much in medicine. So scale makes a huge difference. And I think for medicine, introducing scale, most experiments, when people run control experiments, and I heard numbers ranging from $20,000 to $50,000 that cost to have one subject in the experiment. So clearly, you can't run on a large number of subjects, which means that a lot of experiments are run on a small number. This opens up the whole world. Of course, the data is not the same. It's much harder. It's much noisier, and so on and so forth. But that's exactly what I heard when I started working on the web. That's what everybody said. The data is going to be messy. You won't be able to do anything with it. It's unreliable, and so on and so forth. And we proved that scale actually can overcome that. And today, Google can find you lots of answers pretty well, even though it deals with information that's non-structured, unreliable, and so on and so forth. Can get better insight. So the question is, Can we do it for medicine? So I left Google about a year ago, and I started a small R&D center in the Bay Area. We're trying to hire computer scientists, not medical experts, and trying to see what can we do to get better access to information, organize information better, do whatever we can to get better information. And in particular, I'm looking at, we have all the scale, can we somehow use the scale in a better way? Now, of course, let me just actually mention some of the kind of questions that I'd like to ask. None of those questions are new. I mean, lots of people are working on that. Great things are being done. I just hope to do more of that. Okay? Very good. I assume I'll get some questions myself.
Are you ready? Okay, so we're ready.
Yes,
okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, good. So I think we're supposed to sit over here.
Okay.
Let's see, there's some tape here. I guess if I don't like your answers, I could put this on your mouth.
Okay. What if I don't like the questions?
I'll keep it over here, just to make sure. Okay, so sounds fascinating. So this new lab, why did they hire a computer scientist? I mean, it's like if the San Francisco Philharmonic hired me to help them out. I mean, I know nothing about music. What's a computer science person doing there?
So I don't have particular knowledge of medicine. I wish I had, but I don't. There's some value in getting some people from a different field. Sometimes, you have a lot of habits and you do things because everybody else does them because that's how you used to do them. And sometimes bringing somebody from the outside, especially since, again, this is an information business. And I'm hoping that the experience that I have in the last 25 years is seeing how all those businesses got into the web and how all this information helped many businesses can help. On the other side, I have to admit, the fact that I don't have a lot of medical knowledge means that very often I don't know what I'm talking about. And that I have to live with that, and sometimes it could be embarrassing, but you'll excuse me.
So you're not going to hire any medical experts?
That's the plan right now is no. I want to hire mostly people who know how to deal with large-scale data, know how to deal with computers, know how to deal with search, know how to take all of this and build better systems.
Okay. So you talked about all the types of data that are available, but why? I mean, you worked at Google and you've done great things with these search engines, and other people here have done a lot of work. But why do we need anything else than Google? Why don't we just let Google now find all these new sources of information, and what's left to do?
So, as I mentioned in that particular example, Google, does very well, but it's not perfect. And in particular, the main problem is that there is not enough. The data is not there, and it's not organized in the right way, so it's very difficult to find. And so if you have for some specific questions, it's not unusual for you to go and search Google. Everybody does that. And you go to a particular form, and there is your question, and there's an answer. And you have no idea who gave you that answer. And I think often this is correct answer, but many times it's not. Mm-hmm. We can do better than that. And the information may be hidden in 5 different scientific articles that's very difficult to read, and it's very hard to aggregate because people write scientific articles, don't think about the aggregation problem later on. That's not part of the business model. And it might be in the medical record. There might have been 100 or 100,000 other people with exactly your problem, and we can study them and see exactly what happened to them later. But that's harder to do, and that's what we're hoping to start to do.
Okay. Now, I hear that, I mean, even these journals that you're going to be relying on often have incorrect facts. I mean, you hear about these scandals and so on. So how can you trust even the journal, and let alone the other sources of information out there? So how are you going to know what's right or not? Incidentally, one of my claims to fame, my first Wikipedia page that I had was at a workshop like this many years ago. I made the comment, Wikipedia can't be successful. It's a crazy idea. How can you trust what people put in Wikipedia? So for many years, my web page, one of my students, well, for some months, said, my only entry said, Hector does not like Wikipedia. He thinks it's a stupid idea. And that was my Wikipedia page. So the same thing here. I mean,
and it was correct.
You don't like Wikipedia either?
No, it was corrected. That was your statement.
Oh, yes. I guess so. You got me there.
I think Wikipedia proved that getting crowdsourcing, as it's called now, it's actually not a new idea, but it was so successful that I remember all the encyclopedias who are, most of them, almost all of them are dead now, kicking and screaming and thinking, well, nobody can do it better, right? The only way to do an encyclopedia is to have a set of experts who will sit up for years and write all of that, and that's the only way to do it. And somehow we managed, again, because of scale, we managed to do it better. And if you ask people 20 years ago, nobody would have believed that that's possible.
But isn't
we
there
proved that it is.
Well, but it's a different way. In Wikipedia, I go to check some fact about some movie star or some King Richard III or whoever I'm reading about. And if it's wrong, well, it's not the end of the world. But now you're talking about my health, right? So aren't the stakes higher
right.
now?
Well, people go to first of all, people go to Yahoo Answers to find out what to do with their health. As I said, more often than they go, but they also go to Wikipedia. And I'm betting that the information in Wikipedia about health is pretty good. But it doesn't go to the tail. It gets you the introduction of a disease, it gets you something about the major drugs and so on, but it doesn't go much deeper than that. There's a limit of how much information they can give, and that's what we try to do.
And isn't there, I'm just trying to poke holes in this idea. I mean, if you're going to be looking at information on the web, right? I mean, there's probably a lot of people who like heroin, right? And there's probably, I don't know, I don't check the heroin websites or blogs, but you're going to find a lot of positive sentiment articles about heroin, and then you're going to sort of conclude that, oh, that must be a good thing to do.
That's right, and I haven't checked, but I suspect you're right. The point is, this is not supposed to be, and most other information are not supposed to be comprehensive and complete. It's not like, if you read it on the web, it's definitely true, go on. It's supposed to complement everything else. So I don't suggest that you'll stop talking to your doctor or stop reading scientific articles if you're a researcher and so on and so forth. I'm saying this is an extra information that could be extremely useful if organized correctly, searched correctly, and authored correctly to what exists now. And again, that was proven in many other businesses.
Okay, good.
Again, I'm not suggesting that we'll stop what we're doing now and start doing everything with crowdsourcing. Okay. But we should use more of it. I mean, it's a good example. How many of you bought something on Amazon last year? Okay. Well, I think almost everybody. How many of you read the user reviews? Okay, almost all of you. How many of you took a prescription drug or any drug whatsoever, illegal drugs altogether, last year? Okay? How many of you read the user reviews before you took the drug? Nobody. Why is that? They're not there. It's hard to find. Somehow, we did not set up the system to give you information that could be so useful. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that you decide what drugs to take based on user reviews. But it could be pretty useful to know. And I'm not suggesting that it's perfectly reliable. Still can be quite useful if done correctly. And I think that's part of the deal. If you have a large scale, there are tools to allow you to get through the better stuff of it, and get something useful. It's not a panacea that solves everything. It's not the best of everything, but it's useful. And scale makes it easier.
So, I mean, let me talk about recommendation engines, right? So we've talked about search, but for those of you who don't know, I mean, there's a type of software that is focused more on recommending things. It's slightly different than search engines, where the search engine, you have a query and they're just trying to find you items that sort of match the query. With recommendation engines, you're trying to sort of predict what movies will you like or what books will you want to read and so on. So it sounds in a way that what you're thinking of is sort of like a recommendation engine where you could sort of give advice to the person, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering what you think. I mean, from your point of view for this application, are recommendation engines what's needed, or they need to be changed, or it's the same as search? What are your thoughts?
Right. So the reason recommendation engines are so successful, for example, if you go to Amazon, it says people who bought this also bought this. And it's exactly that. They just look at all the buying records, and since they have so many, they can actually predict very well what's related to that particular product, just because of the data. Same thing can work in medicine. People who took this drug, eventually, maybe 2 years later, will take this drug. Or people who took this drug maybe will have this problem. Right now, the data we get or the knowledge we have are done using reasonably small-scale experiments. And I suspect it can be better. That's what I'm saying. So at least that's the hope. So we can apply more data to it to make the insights better.
So 2 questions. One, do you envision then in the future the searcher, the person interacting with the system, giving some more background information about what my health is, what I've taken, and so on, so I can get better recommendations?
I envision more than that. In fact, some of it comes, by the way, from Nigam Shah, who's here, who's doing a lot of amazing work using this kind of data. I can imagine you going to a doctor, and the doctor or the record has all your history, and when you ask a question, they can have a button that says, okay, there are 10,000 people with exactly this problem, or people similar to you with this problem, and they did, and half of them did this, and half of them did this, or whatever. The answer they will give you is not based on something they learned 15 years ago and maybe updated once or twice, but the answer they give you is based on 100,000, an experiment that was done in real time with 100,000 people, right, based on the record. Again, I'm not suggesting that's the only thing they're going to do. And that's going to help them decide based on their experience as well. But that could be an amazing source. And I suspect that will happen. The doctors will have access to it and will be able to query in real time the history of everything else, just like Amazon has right now.
Interesting.
Right?
So you mentioned, I think I heard you say, talking about the sort of drug control, the studies. I mean, when a company comes up with a new drug, the FDA has this very rigorous procedure for testing the drugs and so on. But once it's approved, a lot of new data is generated in the community out there, people that using it, having adverse effects and so on. Does the FDA today do anything in terms of tracking, using this data to track how the drug is doing out in the real world, or could they use it? What are your thoughts on that?
I am not sure. I suspect that there are lots more research that's being done as follow-up to lots of, especially for popular drugs. And they probably look at this research. If new things happen, they look at it. But some of it is there. It's in the records. If we follow everybody. The other thing that we don't have, or not have enough in medicine, is knowing what the outcome. You go to the doctor or you complain only when you have something bad. If the doctor then assumes that if you're not coming back, that means that got solved. It's not always the case. But there's no mechanism for you to come every day and say, okay, that's better, this is worse, this is better, and so on. Although people give feedback about everything else in their life, and they give it in others also about health, but they give it in a way that information is not used for other people. Okay? So we could make mechanisms like this. Why shouldn't we have a mechanism where all patients give feedback? Maybe not all, but enough patients give feedback so doctors actually do use that feedback later on. Technology is there. People do it in other businesses. We can do that. The question is how to do it in the right way. And I'm hoping to study and build tools helping people build it in the right way. Okay.
Okay, good. Can I switch tracks, since I have one of the world's experts on just search engines, and that's something that fascinates me. I've worked on I have a couple of questions that are more generic, not necessarily about health, but of course they're relevant in healthcare search too. For us old timers, remember in the old days of the web and search engines, human beings would actually edit their web pages and put like my favorite link, my favorite band, and so on. Even Yahoo, for example, started right here by a handcrafted directory of useful sites, right? So the links and the data on the web was generated by a whole bunch of us. So the search engines, when they were taking into account the structure and the page rank and so on, would tend to bubble up results that were popular as far as people would believe, right? So we got that type of results. But nowadays, I see a lot less of these human curated links and web pages. It's all generated by large corporations, and very few people bother to put things in their web pages. Plus, Google has done such a darn good job of search that say, well, why do I need to put links to my favorite band in my web page? Because anybody who wants my band can just Google that. say Hector's favorite band, and it'll probably figure it out on its own since it's so good. So now what we're getting from these search engines is just a bunch of corporate speak, and people have lost their voice. What do you think? Is this true or not? Am I being paranoid?
So it is true that Google succeeded initially because it took the links that other people put and figure out a way to use it in the best way. And then because it so succeeded, people stopped putting links. And Google adapted. So the search algorithm adapted. We found other ways to find that information. We found other ways to filter the information, to rank the information, and so on. So you have to adapt.
Yes.
And it is true that the links today are used less than they used before. You have to agree, though, that the quality of search at Google today is better than it was 10 years ago, by far. And it's improving all the time. It is true that the notion of one person contributing is less, but that's natural because you have 1 billion users on the web. You can't have everybody contribute a lot. They all contribute a little.
But are we getting enough of these not corporately blessed links and information? That's because all the stuff I get, yeah, it's interesting, but there could be other interesting things out there that are not sponsored by Coca-Cola or some big company that I might be interested in. How do I know? Now we don't get those.
I suspect you still get it in many different sources, not just search. I mean, people don't read everything they do through search. There is social networks. There are other ways to get information. And again, people adapt. People adapt, and those businesses adapt it.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's the way it has to be.
Okay. Good. Good. Oh, you want to add something to this? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much for really stimulating. Sorry. Hello? It doesn't matter. Should I speak loud or should I wait? No, that works. Oh, okay. Wow. Thanks very much for coming. For some of us in the audience are exquisitely familiar with NIH because it gives us all of our money. So could you tell a little bit of the X's and O's of what is your relationship? Are you part of an institute? Is this an intramural or extramural? Just because some of us just care about this way more than we probably should.
Okay.
And are interested in it, believe it or
And
not.
what's your budget?
I
We don't need to know that. We don't need to.
I suspect all of you know more about NIH than I do. I just joined them recently. This is intramural. It's part of NLM. In fact, we call ourselves NLM West, and they let us do this. And that's about it. And so intramural search within NLM. NLM is the National Library of Medicine.
We can take more questions. I mean, I guess we can, due to popular demand, we'll take questions. If you run out of questions, I have a couple more that I can ask.
I'm not in any way part of the organization NIH that gives away money. But I do hire computer scientists, and I can give money to students and
So
others
now watch
who
half
want to do
the audience
research.
leave
Okay.
when they realize you don't have money to give. Yes, Steve.
Thanks for coming and sharing your vision with us today. This is really interesting. But what you've said so far is pretty high level. And I think a lot of us are wondering, what are some specific examples of what you actually intend to do in your organization? And maybe just to prime the answer a little bit, it occurs to me that you could be focusing on particular problems. How can we help patients or doctors to identify other patients just like them, patients like me? Or maybe you're trying to solve the problem that if I Google a set of symptoms that I have, I get 100 possible ailments, which is, of course, totally useless. I want something a little more intelligent and curated that says, here are the few you probably have, rather than the ones that are exceedingly unlikely. Or maybe you're not interested in any specific applications at all. You told us a lot about how the data exists, but it's not accessible. So maybe what you're going to do is crawl both visible and dark parts of the web, do knowledge-based construction, and create the infrastructure that will enable other people to make the applications. Or maybe it's something else entirely. So I was hoping you could give us a few specific examples of what you're actually hoping to do.
Very good. So the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is my goal is not to look at high-level things. I'm mentioning it here because I'd like to inspire you guys to think about some of those things, and maybe some of you might want to work with us. But the goal is to build tools, to build actually software tools that other people will use to help solve this problem. And those software tools will have to do with search. That's what I know how to do, and we'll try to improve that. That's one thing. It has to do with improving organization of data. So, for example, Right now, when you write a paper, and let's assume the paper is on the web and it's available. Most papers are not available on the web, which I still don't understand. And not only the papers are not available, but the citations of the papers are not available. If you do search, you want to find links. The best in scientific articles analogy to links is the citations. But the citations are not available for most papers. And even though the researchers write them, and then they give away the rights to those citations. So I can't use them to improve search. I hope to help with that. And NIH actually did help. They passed all kinds of regulation to make it more open. So that's one. When you talk about electronic health records, I'm looking at how do you detect biases in them. My guess is people have access to their own hospital or their own particular network, and those networks will have a particular set of biases because of the patients that go there or because of who knows what. How do you detect it? The tools for doing that. We're looking at tools actually with NIGM. We're looking at tools to detect similarities of patients. How do you define similarity of patients and how do you use it? That's one problem that we're actually looking at. So I'm going to be opportunistic and look at issues that, one, we can solve and solve with software, and two, are important to that field. But it's definitely about solving specific problems.
Okay, I think we have another question over here. Please.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to comment because you asked what is the FDA. I think the FDA doing post-marketing of the drugs are actually their phase 4 studies. These are non-interventional studies, and they're actually closely monitored, and they're acting on that. But it's just a comment. And I have two brief questions. So one thing is you were suggesting that you could use patient feedback, like on side effect of drugs, and use that for information purposes. So I want to ask, how are you dealing with placebo effects? So, because a lot of drugs, specifically with psychopharmacological drugs, have placebo effects. So in placebo groups, there occur headaches, vomiting, all those things. So people are reporting that continuously. So how do you see any way by subjective reports actually to get any meaning? I'm a physician and I also worked at NIH for 5 years. So I'm a little bit critical with that because as a physician, I'm dealing all the time with this. That how to get the placebo effect out of the subjective feedback. And the other thing is, do you have any intentions just to do also some kind of intelligent search or classification type within patients? For instance, one really burdensome thing in clinical practice is if you have like chronic patients, and with all the digital information systems now, the patient comes to the appointment, you open his file and you have like 600 PDFs if he was there for like a patient for the last 20 years or so, and you actually can't read them anymore because there are like too many. And in one PDF, it might say there he has an allergy against penicillin, or he didn't tolerate that drug, or this drug didn't work.
I can tell you that I'm not looking at the second question.
Yeah.
I think that's about how to build those information systems better. What I'm looking at is, I think the electronic medical records were built to help deal with one patient. Very often it's one patient, one doctor, but you want to distribute it such that many doctors who treat the same patient will see the history and make it easier to see. But it's about one patient. There's less work about how do you connect all of them together so you can learn from many different patients how to do it better for other things. And many other businesses had the same problem, and the web's kind of solved it for them. So for the first question, absolutely, placebo is a huge effect. I was amazed to hear that in many cases it's 30 to 40% are cured by placebo. So my first reaction, of course, as an engineer, well, why don't you just start selling placebo out there? And I found that many people do. They just don't call it placebo. They call it a different name. And dealt with it for many years. I'm not suggesting that all the information problem and insight problem that have to do with medicine are easy, and I'm going to just come and ignore all the different problems. That's what makes it actually interesting, that they are so hard. That you have a placebo effect, and different people will react in different way to the same treatment, and so on and so forth. What I'm suggesting is that given the information with that amount of scale, makes it a different way to study them. and maybe a good way, in addition to everything else.
Okay, good. Do we have another question? Can we, or who has the, I guess somebody has the microphone over there, and then you'll be next. Go ahead.
First off, thank you very much for coming. I think this is a really exciting idea. So I'm a researcher, and I use data-driven techniques for medical research. One of the challenges that I face, which I suspect many folks in this audience have too, is getting access to large quantities of high-quality data. So do you think it'd ever be possible from a regulatory perspective, or from any perspective for that matter, to create some form of an API where researchers and even companies could access your data?
Yeah, I'd like to say, I come from the government and I'm here to help. But I actually not really come from the government. I wish I could, I completely agree with you. That is, getting access to all, that eventually we want to have access to all those records, but getting access to all those records is hard for several reasons. One of them is that they're now in many different systems that don't talk to one another. Another one is privacy, which is a real problem and needs to be addressed. No question about that. And there are other issues. I believe those problems can be solved. So like the web, when we started the web, it says, well, you won't be able to do this because nobody's going to put this information, and if they put it, we're starting. So you start small, you get some access to some records, and we're trying to build access to more. And when people see the value of it, they'll give you more access. And I believe the regulatory agency will eventually, when they see the value in it and they see how much they can actually help in treating people.
The question is, will this be in my lifetime or not? Will I see this? Now, granted, my lifetime is much shorter than yours back there.
I strongly suspect the answer is yes, that it will be in your lifetime. Mostly because I hope you live. But I think and I've seen that. Again, I've seen that in many other areas, that people didn't believe that things will move fast enough, and they did. It's not easy. And I'm not naive to think that, just because I say so, or because I think so, because it's the right thing to do, it will just happen. It'll be a challenge.
Good. We have another question here.
Yeah, I was wondering about some of the kind of quirks of internet search that could potentially be harmful when it comes to medicine. Things like, a sensational link is going to get clicked on more.
Absolutely.
So if someone searches vaccines and autism, the Lancet paper is probably going to be the first one that comes up and not all the ones debunking it. Or similarly, you get like the echo chamber effect, where you start clicking on links about homeopathy and vaccines causing autism, and you get more and more of this coming back to you until you start thinking that that's the truth. Do you have a plan for dealing with that kind of a thing?
It's an enormous problem. It's a real problem. It's a problem that bothered me for a long time. It's actually worse than that, I can say. Because even within science, imagine if there is a particular hypothesis, something important about cancer, and 10 people study it, and 9 find that there is really no effect. There's nothing there. And 1 find that maybe there is something. Which one do you think will make the paper? Okay? Many papers. If you search for it, which one would you find? Many different sources. So now you suddenly think that it's not just 1 out of 10, it's actually 100 out of 100, because the first 100 sources will all talk about this right sexy thing that appears there. So you need to know how to read that information. It's not really, you can say that it's a problem with search, but it's a problem in general of distributing information. Newspapers are not particularly set up to distribute the best medical information. They're set up to sell newspapers. Right? I can't blame them. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. So it's up to the medical community to be able to take all this information and present it in a better way. And some of it has to do with search and organizing information better. Some of it has to do with discovering the information in a different way. I hope to design some search things as well. But it all boils down to you need the better information, right?
According to all the emails I get, male hair loss is a solved problem, right? I just need to buy all these things, but
I didn't know that.
I'll send you I forward the messages I get all the time.
Oh, I know how to find things.
Back there, do you have the microphone? Oh, sorry. There's someone over here, and then you'll be next back there.
I promise to give you the mic. Thank you. Udi, thanks for doing this. This was great. And Hector, this is really a fun forum. So this week we were lucky enough, we did actually, even though you're saying you don't give out money, the NIH did give us some money to form an undiagnosed diseases network, which launched this week, and it was it's a very good thing. So these are for patients who have the rare conditions with mysterious symptoms that nobody can solve, and there's a network now set up, including one at Stanford, that these patients can come and get the best that medical technology has to offer. But one of the most important things in trying to work out what they have and if it's something discrete is finding another patient with the same mysterious symptoms. And medical records have failed us in doing that because, as you pointed out, and we've been discussing here, they're not shared. Individual institutions, never mind different countries. This is something we want to share across not just regional boundaries, but national boundaries. So they have to use the tools that are available today. So this is why the question is relevant for you. I mean, how would you recommend that, say, a family that has a little kid with a very unusual syndrome and a series of unusual collection of symptoms gets that out in the public domain to maximize their chance of finding another family with another kid with those symptoms?
I wish I had a solution. I think if it's rare enough, chances are that the few people who have that disease form the group of some sort already, and you can find that group, and then you can connect to them. That's already happening as a ground level, and without any medical establishment involved. And some of those groups are very, very good, and they get support, and they get information, and so on. I would love to see that much more organized, because not all those groups are good. And for lots of major diseases, there may be 5,000 groups like that, and you don't know which one. If they're very, very rare, there's probably only one or two, and they're good. But in general, how to organize the patients. This is not just, in the old days, it was you go to the doctor, and there's only one source of information, and you get the information and back. I actually had an experience 20 years ago of going to a doctor who recommended surgery. And at the time, it was very unusual, but I had access to Medline. And so I went to Medline, and I did my own study, and I found out that there were some papers that suggested that surgery solved the symptoms but doesn't solve anything else. And I gave a copy of those two papers to the doctor. And he was so offended, he gave the nurse orders not to talk to me anymore. That what I did is so unquestionable that nobody should talk to me anymore. And he did send me a bill, though, which I decided to follow his advice and not talk to him anymore. But that changed. That was true 20 years ago. That's not true anymore, right? There is an understanding that people get the information from everywhere, and you have to take that into account. Well, let's get them better information.
Okay, so we have time for about maybe three or four questions more. So there's that one, there's the guy in the red shirt, and then you, and then maybe, okay, so you could be the last one. We'll see how time is going, okay?
I should mention, this is 20 years later, and he was wrong. That surgery was not needed. I didn't take his advice.
So I'd like to ask you to give us your predictions about what's going to change in the way that the healthcare ecosystem works after we have these kinds of changes in the way information is distributed. So right now, if you're in research, there's a lot of heavy infrastructure which limits the ability of where it can be done, who can be included. Same thing if you're a physician, you kind of have the monopoly because you went to medical school on the data that's out there, the knowledge that's out there to practice medicine. I was involved in the internet 20 years ago, and there was this term disintermediation, the idea that those power structures were going to change and new players could enter in because of access to information and resources that they didn't have before. Do you see that kind of disruptive change happening in the healthcare industry, and what would change?
I think it will. I think actually already it's happening. Many of the support groups are very influential. They're influential not just within patients, but also within doctors and particular research areas. I'm reluctant to predict things. Niels Bohr, one of my heroes, once said that it's very difficult to predict, especially the future. I've seen a research paper that took some results and then did machine learning on it and managed to predict the outcome. Turns out they had the outcome as part of the training. So I call that kind of research, computer scientists managed to predict the past. That's quite a bit of that is happening as well. I can't predict.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to know if you drill in the data yourself. How often do you do it, like to find bugs, and what do you use to find bugs in your data?
That's a good question. I actually do it all the time. I like to look at the raw data. If you run any system, you want to look at what the user is telling you. So you look at the logs. At Google, for example, people look at the search logs. All the people in search look at the search logs all the time. You look at feedback from users. When I ran Google Search, we had 1 billion users, but I still read feedbacks from users. They didn't know that, but I did. And I learned lots of really good things from there. So I would encourage all of you to actually put your stuff there when other people can comment and then read their comment. There's a lot of garbage there, but there's some jewels as well, and it's worth it. Okay.
Go ahead.
So a lot of the progress hinges on having data available at scale.
Right.
And particularly for medical data, the problem is not the technology, the problem is incentives. And trying to solve an incentive problem with technology usually doesn't go well. And so as data science, as a platform across the university, what would you suggest that we do in order to get over the incentive problem and not get too mired in the technology?
Absolutely. You solve it by bringing value. Once you bring value to somebody, they want more of it. Or you solve it by, and value could be efficiency. You do something more efficient, and efficiency always wins. Or better quality, or money, obviously. But there's so many things you can improve in healthcare that if you just choose one of them and say, well, I can give you more insight, or I can give you better cost, or I can give you, they'll start open up, and then you build, then you start with this, and then you build more and more, and then they'll give you more and so on. So you get into these virtuous cycles. That's exactly how the web happened. Everybody says, why would I put my information on the web? Well, it turns out you did it because it brought you something back. It got you it was useful for you to do, so more people start doing it, and then they did more and more of that. I think it's the same thing. You have to bring value. It's very hard to talk in abstract, saying you should do this because it's a good thing. You have to show it.
Maybe I'm the last, I don't know.
Well, we might have time for another question.
Okay.
We're becoming more efficient in answering the question.
That's right.
Well.
You have to learn too. That's what I'm doing. I'm learning. You have to learn as you go along.
So 2 quick related questions. First, have you looked at the efforts of PCORNet, the research network being built by Precori that now covers about 1/4 of the United States, trying to network all the electronic health records for the purpose of both extracting information and also conducting research? It's been extraordinarily difficult within each network that they're building to get the EMRs, even within those networks, sometimes within the same institutions, to speak to each other. But that seems to be exactly the sort of infrastructure that you want to build upon, and there are lessons. Have you been looking at that?
I have not looked specifically at that. I know there are several others like that I'm starting to look at. There are, as I said, I'm not doing anything that other people are not doing. I think this is now the right time, and a lot of people have started doing it, especially in the last 5 years, and I'm just hoping to help them and help others as well. I think it's inevitable that this will happen. I think it's inevitable that eventually people will see that the scale that they can get access directly to all their consumer or patients will guarantee that they will want it, and there will be enough value there to make it happen.
The second half is that they're not doing well in some areas. It's really, really difficult, the politics and the privacy. And it would be very interesting to look at where this extraordinary effort is not coming through very well to see what the challenges will be.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess, go ahead. There are short questions, and then maybe you can get another short question in.
So I think, as has been said, one of the problems is access to information. But as a patient, we can't really have it both ways. We can't want everything to be private, but not have access to sort of all the community's information about health. So why not a voluntary thing where if I go to the doctor and I give him permission to give all my information to a repository, in return, he's allowed to access that repository to give me information about my health and treatment.
Absolutely.
If people volunteer, and to me that's worthwhile. I don't care so much about the privacy of my health information. Other people care a lot more. If you care a lot more, then you don't get to have the community information at your doctor's disposal.
Right. So one of the recommendations that I made, that I absolutely agree, you have to give people incentive if you want them to do something. One of the recommendations I made is if you want to follow up on a particular drug, on a particular treatment, particular for drug, why don't you tell people that they have to fill up a particular questionnaire at the end of to get a refill? Or maybe they don't have to do this, but if they do this, they get 10% off on the refill. So A, you know that these people have taken that drug because you you prescribe that, and you get direct feedback from them. A very simple system to set up. Right now, it's not done at all. There will be lots of other ways to get people to get the right incentive. Okay.
Okay, so the last question, you get to.
So
okay.
In your last operation system, what was the most searched term that people looked for? I don't know, whatever you built last, what did people look for most?
So I ran the search group for Yahoo, Amazon, Google, and last year at YouTube. So I finished the Grand Slam of search. I really did. And I can tell you that it's different in every engine. It was different in every era. And it's sometimes different every day.